Welcome. Thank you. If you're coming in late, we are just getting started. We are here for the 20th anniversary Q&A around Drew Edwards' long-running independent comic, Halloween Man. And what I thought would be useful first, and so many of you have a relationship with the show, with the comic, I thought you could introduce yourself and describe your relationship with Halloween Man, and then we'll go around and I have a number of questions. And if my questions become pedantic and tiresome, Drew can just kick me out of the room, and you can have a lot more fun. So let's just start. Since you guys can't see what order I'm going in, I'm just gonna call on you.
Real quick before I'm sorry to interrupt. Is Matt live on here?
Shannon Brewery just logged on, so
yep.
I assume
there he is. I put unmute Matt live, and then we're all accounted for. Sorry about that, Jason.
No, it's no problem at all. And he is unmuted. There you go. Yeah. No problem at all. Okay, so why don't we? I'm just going to start my left to right, which doesn't. Unfortunately, nobody's grid looks exactly the same, which is one of the hilarious randomnesses of Zoom. So, John Sowder, I'm going to start with you. So, introduce yourself and what's your relationship to Halloween Man?
Oh, well, my name is John Sowder, and big surprise. And I actually met Drew back. Well, I mean, it was through. I was working on a comic called Freaktown Comics. Is that right, Drew?
One of Russell's.
Yep, that's one of mine.
Oh yeah. And you, man, you are such a great creative writer. I really liked a lot of your ideas.
Thank you.
And he actually told me about that Drew was looking for an artist, and I'm a big horror comic fan, and I was checking out some of Drew's stuff, and Halloween Man is kind of a horror comic in the same way that the movie El Topo is a Western. It's just, it's beyond, it kind of breaks that kind of genre norm for me. And I just thought it was really creative and fun and completely unlike anything that I'd ever seen. And we were actually going to do American Nightmare back in 2014. It didn't happen until much later on, but yeah, that's how I got to know Drew.
That's really
and yeah, absolutely. And this is the first time I've actually used Zoom in a like this, and probably like Drew said, the first time he's heard my voice. So
it is.
So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Let's go to Russell. You're next on my clockwise. So tell me about your relationship to Halloween. Introduce yourself and tell us about your relationship.
Hi there. I'm Russell Hillman. I'm on and off, mostly on. I've been the editor of Halloween Man since 2003. I came across Drew when we were both posting on Millarworld and read his scripts and loved them, and noticed that he can't type for shit. So I offered to edit for him, and the rest is well, maybe not history, geography. The rest is geography.
That's really great. Thank you. Mr. Gholson, or Gholson, or tell me how to pronounce that.
Gholson.
John?
Yeah, Gholson.
Yes. And introduce yourself.
Best last name ever. I have major last name envy.
Thank you. I'm John Gholson, and I had heard of Drew through an acquaintance. Chris Novus had told me about his buddy who made comics. So Drew was on my radar, and then we didn't meet each other until a really weird. I'm from Texas, so I live here in Austin, same city that Drew lives in, and I was at a con in San Antonio at like an old hollowed out grocery store that they were using for a Comic-Con, and it was a really, really strange con. And I probably hovered around their table and chit-chatted for a good long while and bought some books and let him know that at the time I was doing comics for Fandango.com, the movie ticketing site, and let him know that, hey, I'm a local and I'd I want to be looking for more opportunities. And so when he put together the Bat City special, which was the Austin-centric special, I came aboard for that issue and then helped out with this one.
That's really great. By the way, I think I'm going to ask you guys what's the weirdest con experience you've ever had, or maybe just the weirdest con. But in the meantime, James Figueiredo, you're next. Tell us about yourself.
Okay. Well, good night, everybody. My name is James Figueiredo. I'm from Brazil. I came across Drew. We've known each other from the Miller World boards. And we started talking, and that I believe it was about 2002, 2003. And we started collaborating. I think the first story I drew for Drew was the Monsters Guide. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I
it
still
was
have a
kind of
couple
like,
of those.
okay, it was kind of like an ad for a construction company that repaired cities that were destroyed by kaiju-like monsters. And then we started from there, and we've been collaborating ever since.
That's wonderful. Thank you, James. And I said your name wrong. It's Figueiredo, and I said...
I know it's it's hard on you guys. It's Figueiredo.
I love it, and I apologize.
Thank you.
No
problem.
Nicola Scott, welcome, and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Nicola, and I, like sort of James, Andrew, and Sergio, and Russell, we all kind of met on Millerworld around 2003. I think it was 2003, on the Creative Forum, which was kind of really sparking at the time. And my first job with Halloween Man, which might have been similar for a lot of people, was we did a Christmas special jam.
Yes,
right?
Yes, I remember.
And
Yeah, that's where I started.
I did a couple of pages on that, and I didn't sort of know people terribly well, and I didn't know the book terribly well, and so I was just kind of, you know, faffing my way through it. But I quite liked the character, and I quite liked Drew. And when he approached me about doing another story, I was like, yeah, let's get into this. And it was that story. I can't remember what it was called. Drew, can you remember what it was called? It was like a 30-page story. It had the like the Justice League equivalent in it, and it had man goat, and
yeah,
it was hilarious. It was just the funniest thing. I couldn't believe what I was reading.
Icon.
Russell
That's
is
it.
correct.
Nice one, Russell.
Yeah.
And that was a hoot. That was like a 30-page story, and that kind of really cemented my love for these characters. And they were actually in my portfolio when I got my first sort of big-time professional gig at San Diego Comic-Con. And so whenever I've had a chance, I had the scene with Solomon in his underpants in a bubble. That whole scene, Mangoat was in the scene. I can't remember who else was in the scene, but I had that scene in my portfolio when I got my job drawing Star Wars books, sort of,
Wonderful.
you know, 6 months later.
And an omen of things to come as far as you drawing many men in tight pants in comics.
Well, those jeans have got to fit. But yeah, I sort of, you know, from then on, I sort of said to Drew, you know, whenever I have time, if you've got a little thing, I absolutely want to be involved, because I just love these characters. They're so much fun. And anytime I read any of these stories, I'm just like, this stuff is crazy. I love it. I don't, it needs a much bigger audience because it deserves it.
Oh, absolutely.
Aw.
Thank you.
I'm gonna blush a lot tonight. It's a good thing I'm in low lighting.
Plus, your face is now all covered, so it's easier to hide when you're blushing.
That's true. I have my manly beard to cover it up.
Sergio Calvet, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi. Yes, I'm Sergio Calvet. I'm from Barcelona. I met Drew the same place that Nicola, Russell, and James, the Miller World boards. I'm the guy who came after Nicola to draw Halloween Man. I think that the art of the series took a dive in that moment.
Oh,
That's
no,
not
we
true.
didn't.
But
No.
It did. That's beautiful.
but as I think that Drew liked what he saw, but he kept asking me to draw more and more scripts, and I did the math just before, and I ended drawing 596 pages of Halloween Man.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
Holy
that's
shit.
that's without counting covers, pin-ups, or designs. But that's to say, I enjoy it a lot drawing Halloween Man.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Good job too, yeah.
Jamie Bahr. I mean, you and I have talked like literally a billion times, but introduce yourself and tell us your relationship to Halloween Man.
Well, I'm Jamie Bahr. I have a very intimate relationship with Halloween Man. Well, at least with Drew Edwards, who is my husband. We met. Let's see. We met in 2009 while I was on tour for South by Southwest with my band Punk Blues Review at that point. Yeah, fell madly in love. Yeah, that was the first part. I don't know how much Drew wants to divulge about our circumstances at that point, but it was definitely a magical moment where I saw him from across the room while I was on stage and knew I just had to talk to him. And he was incredibly shy and bashful and adorable. And I handed him my card and said, I'll be here for the weekend. Give me a call if you want to show me the sights. And got back up on stage and proceeded to rock out. And he was like, oh, swoon. And the next morning, I got a MySpace message, shows you the time. Yeah, he asked me to go to the Bat Bridge, meet him at the Bat Bridge at sunset. And I was like, this is interesting. So there was
That's pretty romantic.
It's very romantic.
Yeah.
Yes. Beginning of our very gothic Austin romance. I had, at that point I was living in New York. So I ended up moving 2 months later to Austin to get my band Danger Cakes started. And Drew and I had our whirlwind romance that turned into lifelong love. And since then I've kind of, I don't know if it was technically could be seen as voluntarily. I feel like I was kind of written into the comic in a way, or I should say drawn in, where, Lucy existed before Drew and I knew each other. So I'm not the inspiration for the initial character, but she's started looking more and more like me as our relationship grew, and artists got to know me as an individual as well. And to the point where my mom started noticing before I did. I noticed because Lucy started wearing some of my outfits. I was a little weirded out by that. And then I noticed a couple of my, what I call Jamie-isms thrown into some of the writing. The one that I noticed, I think, was I have more cleavage, or no, what's Drew will know it. I always say
I could have cleavage in a turtleneck.
Yeah. And it's true. But yeah, Lucy somehow started saying that, and I was like,
That's
hey.
great. I love it.
So, and then from there, I started, because as Russell said, Drew's typing his shit. When Russell couldn't help, he was too busy. I started helping with editing for the comic, and yeah, from there, it's just been a whirlwind experience and a wonderful one. And I'm so happy to be involved and flattered to have, like, Lucy kind of look like me. So that's weird and cool at the same time. So
I love that. And I love that Lucy Silent Signs Starlet does have an attitude now. And it's I think yeah, here's the other thing that I take away from that. Is only in the most positive way. I mean, but here's what's wild. And for anybody in the audience that's listening, this is wild. I was like way past 30 and married to the point where it was all nostalgia at this point. But apparently, when a woman says to you, hey, I would really like it if somebody would show me around the city, that is flirting. That actually took me like well into my 30s for my wife to tell me, no, that's flirting. You have to go back. So for any of you who can take advantage of Jamie's story, there you are. Okay, so Matt, why don't you tell us about yourself and Willkommen.
Thanks for having me, guys. I met Drew. Drew's comics were on sale at Hops and Heroes Comics in Austin a couple years back, and I love Halloween, and my parents loved everything Halloween, and it was a religious holiday to our family. And so, of course, Halloween Man being into superheroes, I'm like, what is this book? This is amazing. And one person down to the next person said, oh yeah, I know that guy. I know that guy. I know him from this and this. And I'm like, how do I meet this guy? And of course, my wife, Shannon, got asked to judge one of Drew's South by Southwest punk rock shows. And of course I had to come. I'm like, Drew Edwards is going to be there. So I came like a giddy little school child with my stack of books. I'm like, can you sign these, sir? Freaking out and super nervous. And then I'm like, oh, this guy's really cool and super nice. And you were nervous to sign him. It was kind of fun. You're like, why are you a fan of true. This is cool. And then, one thing led to the other. And I worked on a book called Evolution Revolutionaries about a band in Austin that gets superpowers and helps kids learn to recycle and things like that. And Drew needed a letterer, and so I'm the new one to the group. I did the letters for this 20th anniversary special. I did the Fear and Loathing segment, and then did Halloween Man versus the Mummy, which is the brand new book. So thanks for having me, even though I'm as green as I am.
Thank you, Matt, very much. Andrea, or Andrea,
yes.
I don't know, you'll have
yes.
to tell me. But tell
Andrea.
Andrea, okay.
Well, I am a comic book artist, and I started with Drew in making Halloween Man issues when I saw his advertising on Facebook that he needed an artist, and I just applied. I looked at the script, we did some character designs. It was fun to do, and it just started from there, and it was a lot of fun to create. And I was very always very strict with myself to make it like extremely like polished and fun, and because that's what the script usually gives, that kind of energy, that it has to be fun, that it has to be like, I don't know, like rock and roll and just fun to do. So that's what I was trying to do when I was trying to do the comic books, the issues that I was assigned to do.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrea.
You're welcome.
And let's see, who do I have? I'm sorry, I'm looking at my list. Okay, I thought I saw Evan. Evan, are you here?
Evan actually messaged me earlier, and he unfortunately is having connectivity issues.
Oh no!
So Canada is not represented tonight.
Okay.
But Jason Wilson was supposed to be on, and he just messaged me saying he is also having issues. So I told him to email you, and we will see what happens. Although so far I will point out less technical problems than the Ringo Awards. So hey, go us. I'm sorry, was that tacky? I shouldn't have said that. I really enjoyed the Ringo Awards. It made me actually somebody that puts on events like I have so much empathy for when things go wrong. So like seeing that, like they kept they were very apologetic about it, and I just was like, dude, I put on punk rock shows in Austin, Texas. You don't think that we've never had things go haywire? I get it. So like it's good natured ribbing, and I hope it's taken in the spirit of
Absolutely. And I have to say, this summer.
There's Jason Wilson.
Oh well, let's have Jason Wilson introduce himself.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you guys. I've actually been on for a little bit, but it was
Jason.
just like I was having some connectivity issues, so it wasn't doing the whole. I couldn't share video, but now that's working. So hi. So
well, feel free to, Jason, introduce yourself, because I think everybody else has. So yeah, tell us about yourself and about your relationship to Halloween Man.
Okay. Yeah, I actually know Drew through my partner, who is in a band with Jamie, and
Oops. Uh-oh.
Did you freeze or did we?
That's just really fast comic book right out the gate. What's that?
No, keep going. I'm afraid.
Was that a question?
Froze for a sec. You're good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, so I met Drew that way, and I was just like really out the gate fascinated by the characters and the story in the book and all that, because I've been obsessed with monsters and like the old Ghostbuster stuff and classic monsters and all that since I was a kid, and the kind of like rock and roll aesthetic to everything is just super appealing to me. I haven't done a lot of work on it. Drew asked me to work on the Ugly American issue with the Red Guard, and I had an absolute blast with that. So far I've done that and the Lost World one. I worked on that, and I did a few pages for the October one.
Love it. And I by the way, I loved the Red Guard one myself, as just somebody who got a chance to read it before it came out. That was
Thank you.
That was fantastic. All right, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then I'm going to throw it open to see if we have any questions in the audience. I thought it was, so actually, you know what? A lot of you guys talked about Millar World. Drew gave me a whole bunch of questions to ask, but I'm just going to go off in my own direction. Y'all kept mentioning Millar World, however you said that era.
I'm still trying to figure out how the hell you say it.
Yeah.
Miller.
And that
Miller.
era of like 2000.
Millar.
I'm from Texas, okay?
Well, so my
Version of the
question
English
is,
language.
why do you think that was like a special time of indie comics? Do you think if somebody is listening to this now, either live or on YouTube, and they want to get into comics, was there something special about that community? Have we lost that, or are we in a better place now? Just anybody who wants to go, just talk to me about the community aspect of comic creation.
I feel like that community at the time was really something special. I'm on the other side of the world to where the industry that I was trying to break into existed. And for a while, I sort of hitchhiked my way to New York and stayed there for a little bit. But I felt like during that time, it was pre-social media, we only had forums. And while a lot of the websites that had forums and had a creative forum, a lot of them were full of sort of fan art or sort of fan communication. It was just it was a very different environment, where when Millarworld started, it almost immediately had a sort of semi-pro group of people who were talented and actively creating and wanting to create bits and pieces. And I feel like that sparkiness, and we often had sort of professionals dropping in.
Yeah.
It made for sort of quite a dynamic space for us to be able to sort of produce art and encourage each other and be inspired by each other and end up working together. And I don't think I've ever seen anything like it since. You know, forums in general sort of aren't what they used to be. But it was sort of such a tight community that actually had quite a lot of people in it. And we were all sort of participating on it a number of times a day. It was quite fascinating.
To dovetail on the end of that, you know, first of all, I don't know, like absolutely everything she just said is 100% true 10 times over. But, you know, speaking just about myself, you know, in my 20s, you know, I talk about this a lot in interviews. I was a mess in my 20s. Like, so, you know, the comic was really my only outlet. And in Miller World, well, the DC forum, I was involved with the DC Comics fan forum that then sort of shifted over to Miller World. And that was my outlet to a degree. You know, that was a lot of my socializing. So it gave me a lifeline, you know, when I was dealing with a point in my life where, you know, I still deal with mental illness on a daily basis, but like it was debilitating at that point. I couldn't really function normally. And the comic book was really the only thing that I had that pushed me towards interacting with people in any meaningful way. And, you know, and I've created relationships through this forum, you know, and through comics that have now lasted, you know, decades and across, you know, the boundaries of you know, geography of time. I mean, you know, how many people from other countries do we have on this call right now? And you know, Russell actually came over to be a groomsman in my wedding. Like, how crazy is that? Like, you know, that was absolutely a moment. And, you know, I don't think, you know, that sort of thing is going to happen again, because, you know, social media has sort of taken up the space that that forums used to have, and there's no longer that sort of niche forum environment. You know, like if I want to talk about comic books, I can talk about comic books on Twitter and somebody will engage with me, but it's not quite the same. And
it's not, you know, quite the same, is it? Yeah.
No, and I'm not trying to say one is better or worse, but it's
forum was a gathering place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Social media forces people to come to you. A forum was a gathering place where everyone went to meet.
It's a community.
Yeah. But it all depends too, like if you have already people who are interested in the things that you're doing, you just, for example, make your own private group on Facebook, or you make your own Discord, and that's how you build the community. It separated itself from forums, but now it transferred to somewhere else where you can build a community for anything that you're at. And if you have like dedicated fans for it, they will join you, they will talk about things that you like, and then you will see that extreme sort of like amazing engagement that you have with your fans, because they will be up to date. You'll be talking to them, and whenever there's something released or anything like that, then you'll have the chance to communicate. It just transferred to another type of conversation online. That's all.
I wanted to complement something that Drew said. Many of us that were on Miller World when it started knew each other from the DC boards, the DC message boards.
Yeah.
And that was at the time that the authority had just been, Warren Ellis had just left the authority, and DC didn't know what to do with that book because it was a success for all the reasons I think they didn't understand. And then Mark Millar took over, and I think the talks and the conversation that was brewing on the authority board inside the DC Comics boards kind of outgrew the DC boards, and then he started Miller World in, and I think that at that point, the people who went there had kind of a creative mindset, or looking for some kind of different kinds of comics that what the big two were publishing at the time. And I don't know, I think everything kind of gelled, you know, and I think it was Nicola that said that there were pros that would drop in, and Mark Millar himself would be very active on the boards, and I think that encouraged people to participate, and for those of us who wanted to create comics and to be in contact with other people creating comics, that made it easier, I think. I don't know if that makes sense, but I connect that very much with what with the publication of the authority at the time, and what that sparked, you know.
Yeah. Thank you very much. The other thing that I wanted to ask, and then I want to just open it up to questions, because I see at least one in the chat room already, is you know, one thing that I think about when I think about Drew and Halloween Man is that putting up a comic book, putting up an independent comic, is a lot like running it's like running your own theater, you know? It's like literally, hey, we're putting on a play every 3 weeks or every month, and we need a cast, and we need lights, and we need all this stuff. And, you know, I was just wondering what kind of lessons, because a lot of you are pros and a lot of you are independents, what kind of lessons have you learned, both from Halloween Man, but from anybody else, for somebody who'd like to be an independent comic publisher, that you've learned from this experience and working with Halloween Man, but also just working with indie comics in general? Like lessons that, if somebody could walk away with like a single lesson, what would it be? Is it relationships? Is it don't welch on your bets? Like, what is it?
For me, it's been transparency and communication. There's been some times where I've had some hiccups, and, you know, just making sure that, like, if I know that there's life circumstances are getting in the way, or my day job's getting in the way, to get on the horn and talk to Drew and be like, hey, here's the situation, and let him know. And I think the more entrenched I get into the world of comics, that seems to be more of a rarity maybe than it should be. I think sometimes people just ghost. So for me, I think the biggest thing is going, you know, as bad as I may feel inside, it's probably going to be all right. And it's going to be a much better situation if I just talk to the person, my other collaborators, talk to the other people involved. It's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned in working with all this.
Thank you.
100% across the board at every level of the industry, transparency and communication is just paramount, because if you don't have that, everything else falls apart.
I just wanted to add that shit happens to everyone, you know. Like John said, your day job will get in the way, your life will get in the way. You have breakups, you lose your job, you have deaths near you, and being upfront and being, you know, in talking, I think that's the big takeaway, you know, the transparency thing. Yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'd say don't take things personally, because just like you're all saying, you know, you have, you know, being transparent and communicating is wonderful, but when you're on the receiving end of those communications and someone either, you know, ghosts or, you know, doesn't exactly say what's going on in their life, or they're just like, I've got something to do, and you don't hear from them. And then there's that immediate like, oh God, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? Are they mad at me? Those are Drew Edwards's words coming out of my mouth. Because he, you know, Drew always wants to make sure that everyone's taken care of, and you know, it's kind of amazing that, you know, we haven't met all of you in person, you know, and Drew's known you all for, you know, most of everybody for more than a decade. I mean, he's known most of you longer than he's known me. And, you know, he just always sees everyone as family, you know, it's our little work family. And, you know, he just wants to make sure everyone's okay and taken care of. And so when, you know, it's important to, you know that people's lives happen, you know, things just happen. It's not necessarily that you've done something wrong. Sometimes it just takes a longer time than what you would expect or hope for someone to get back to you. And, you know, I think that's a big thing with most types of events. And actually just in general, it's a good relationship thing, is just to not necessarily think that you did something wrong. You know, that people just have their lives to live, and, you know, you're lucky that we're lucky that you all get to be part of our lives, and we get to be part of yours. So
Thank you, Jamie.
100%.
Yep.
Can I just add one to that? That I wish, it drives me crazy that we all have to pretend that we're like bodiless, relationshipless, intellectual clouds working with one another, who don't have, you know, we don't have heart attacks, we don't have children, we don't have parents who are getting old. Somehow it's embarrassing that we have lives. And it's just not helpful, you know? I mean, and yet it's so looked down on to share and go, listen, I know I'm having a hard time this week. Somehow that's almost impossible. Whereas if we were to say, I have a cold, you have a cold, but somehow to say, I'm sad, I'm having a hard time working. It's funny how we talk ourselves into not being allowed to share that stuff. So anyway, there's a question in the chat box from the lovely Julia Guzman. So it says, for people who are new to Halloween Man, this is a super good question. For people who are new to Halloween Man, what are the best issues to start with? So, yeah, tell me. I know my answer, but I want to hear your answer.
Well, I mean, if you want to see some of the work that we're talking about that came about on the Miller World board, you go and you get Halloween Man Super Deformed, which has Nicola's excellent work back when it was still a web comic. I also really like, I always say if they were to make a movie, this would be the best story to adapt. Halloween Man Hallowtide, which came out a couple of years ago. You know, one of my favorite projects that I ever did was Sergio, which is Halloween Man versus the Invisible Man. I love that. You did the introduction to that. I love that story.
That's
those
the
are
kinky one.
those are my three. But
wait a minute, I did the introduction.
If I may, I apologize. If I may, I just want to say, yeah, definitely Super Deformed, #1 choice. But to me, Sergio is like the quintessential Halloween Man artist. Whenever I think about Halloween Man, I always think about Sergio's drawings. So I think Invisible Man is good, but any of the Sergio stuff is excellent.
I was there for a lot of years.
Wow, thank you very much. Okay, so Sean Patrick Brady, who is a name that I actually know from our boards with the show for years. He says, so hello, I'm happy to see you calling in from Australia. Not a question, but just want to say how happy I am to be here with you folks in real time for a change. Yes.
Howdy.
Drew, I think we should do more like camera events like this, you know? I mean, they have now, since COVID, everybody's discovered all these technologies. And now there's things like Scener, where you could watch like Invisible Man to promote your Invisible Man story, and you could show it in Scener, and people could get on with you and watch it with you. There's just
I would have to get over my aversion to looking at my own face to do that. And that's not a well, no, it's not an everybody. I see a couple of people chuckling. That's not an arrogance thing, it's a compulsive thing. Jamie's nodding, she knows well. Like and you know, that's been my problem with this era, because you know, when I was in the throes of my mental illness when I was in my 20s, I actually would go through periods of times where I thought I was disfigured. And I still kind of have a compulsion where I don't like to look at myself. So this whole era where now everything is constant, you're constantly looking at yourself. In some ways that's very therapeutic, but because it's forcing me to confront the delusion. But at the same time, it's not something it's something I still have a hard time with.
If it makes you
Very
feel any better,
disconcerting when you
you're a
talk
very
to
handsome
people.
man.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Ms. Brady.
It
Fiddle
is very
dee dee.
disconcerting when you're on Zoom and you're talking to people and you can see your own face. It's like, I don't want to look at me. It's too weird.
Yeah.
You know, much prefer to be looking at the people that I'm talking to.
I mean, Ms. Scott, I avoid mirrors. I know exactly what you're talking about. And so the way Drew said it is great, which is that we're now sort of entering this thing. We're just confronting ourselves, you know, and you realize like your sister loves you for what you are, not what you think you are. And so you know, it's like, whatever, this is my face. This is who I am, right?
It's like hearing your own voice for the first time.
Right.
Oh,
Like,
nobody
Yeah,
likes
that's always
the sound of their own
alarming.
voice.
Oh, that cannot be right.
Okay, Sarah Morgan has a great question. I really love this. Drew probably ought to take a crack at it, but anybody else could. Says, I'd love to hear about the production pipeline for a typical issue for both the writing process and the art. That's a great question, and I'd love to hear it.
You know, it's different for every story. The writing is usually, you know, 3 weeks to 2 months, because depending on how many drafts I do. You know what, Jason and I go to a lot of high schools here in Texas and do talks, and I'm the bane of every English teacher in the world when I always say I actually tend to prefer my rough drafts to my final drafts, because that's where all the passion is. So if I knock out a pretty good rough draft, I will hand that over to Russell for he'll send it back with a bunch of that dialogue's crap. That's this needs to be fixed, you know, those kind of notes.
That guy needs a hat.
That guy needs a and you know, that kind of stuff. And you know, we'll then pass it off to Jamie for like kind of a final polish before we get it to you know, an artist. The art, you know, that can take up to several months, in sometimes cases, you know, a year, you know, or like the Beyond October issue, which was the Jam issue, and it you know, we started that, like I wrote that back December of last year, and we were working on that literally right up to the point and past that Comixology was like, hey, turn that in. And I'm lucky that I have a good relationship with those people, because at some point I half expected them to be like, no 20th anniversary issue for you, no. But you know, it really depends, because there's always you know, factors that go into what you're doing with that. And I, you know, as far as actually producing art, I think I would like to turn that over to all of the very talented artists. Although, Russell, do you have anything to say about the editing process before we do that?
No, I mean, I start talking with you sometimes before you've even started writing the script. We'll start talking about your ideas and thrash them out between us, and then you'll write the script and then send over to me, and then I'll correct your spelling and send it back, and we go back and forth until it's ready to be drawn.
Endless amounts of emails.
endless amounts of emails.
Andrea, it looked like you were trying to say
varying
something.
amounts of
me?
on topic.
Yeah.
I know, like I remember the process is like, I see the script and I'm like, okay, let's get to work, let's rock, you know, that kind of thing. And I do like the drafts, and everything has to be, well, all of it is in black and white. And well, but before getting to the script, we have to do the character designs, and you know, I always try to follow your notes. and make sure that it's exactly what you want. Because, like I said before, I'm very strict with myself when it comes to perfection. So, and that's what it comes to my part in terms of doing the artwork, just trying to make sure that even with the action scenes, I was trying to make it very fun and like the person could feel like the impact or the fight or the whatever conflict was going on, whether it was a conversation or an action part, it had to be something that people could just feel and just submerge themselves and actually feel like they're there with the characters, at least when they're reading, when it comes to my part.
Do you do your scripts, Drew? And I say this because even though I've edited some, I don't remember the answer to this question. Do you do panel for panel scripts, or do you tend to just break them into scenes and write a screenplay style script? How do you do it?
I'm panel for panel. I'm too much of a control freak to I mean, I love the collaborate aspect. I say control freak. I love working with artists. I love working like when if I didn't love that, I would be a novelist and not a comic book writer. But I really like getting into everything and describing it and kind of giving that like beat down of how it's going to break down from panel to panel. And you know what Andrea was just talking about, honestly, one of my favorite parts of putting together a comic is actually seeing the character designs, because up at that point, it's up until that point, it's just up in my head, and then suddenly it has like a 2-dimensional, you know, or 3-dimensional form. And you know, it's amazing to me to see that for the first time, because and then, you know, there's been a couple of times, particularly with Sergio, where I've gotten a little weepy from seeing a character, because like, you know, because he worked with me so much. Like, I felt like after a while, Sergio just had like a wire running directly into my brain, because like it just would come out like perfect. Like all the character designs, would come out perfect almost every time. And I don't know, like there's always just something thrilling about that part.
So
I gotta say, while Drew writes a full script, they're not actually overly detailed. They're not sort of overwhelmingly detailed. They've got everything in there that you need. Like it's been a long time since I've worked on one of Drew's scripts, but they were sort of like that perfect amount of like, here are the elements, and here is the tone, and here is the setting, and that was kind of it. It was kind of perfect.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I would like to
I
add.
have to say, Drew does give artists a lot of leeway in, especially when creating a character he's never used in the comic book. And he gives just the basic descriptions of what he wants to see, and then just says, "Well, here you go." And I don't know anyone who's ever used like the Stan Lee kind of method of writing, you know, which seems really lazy. Oh, like the Stan Lee method of writing, where it's just kind of a synopsis.
I have
page 3 to 7. They have
really?
I guess if you want to rip off the artist, you can use that. That kind of.
We used a modified version of that on Sort of Dracula. We used a modified version of that. Anytime I've worked with Scott, where I will go, okay, it's 22 pages, right? And so there's this. I'll say scene 1. This is page 1 through 4. Here's what happens. Scene 2, this is page 5 through 7. It's 2-page scene. This is what happens. Scene 3, this is 8 through 11, and it's this long scene, and this is what happens. But be sure that this is happening between 9 and 10, and then he'll draw it, and then
So
it must have worked, because Sword of Dracula is a great comic.
Well, thank you.
I've never seen anyone who worked that way.
So
I've worked that way a few times.
Jason and Andrea can talk about this, because this is from the last year. The Valentine's Day that Time Forgot actually started out as a Marvel style, and I will never do that again, because what happened? Yeah, see, What ended up happening, because we ended up having to have a switch out of artists because of the pandemic, I had to actually go back and write a script retroactively. And I, like the sort of comic book alchemy that, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby may have had in the 60s, whatever that was. And there's a lot of discussion of what that was that we're not going to get into tonight. But that's not something that I think is a good creative, I mean, back me up. I don't know how you two felt about it.
It worked for them, but it didn't work. Well, we made our best. We did our best, all right? We have to give a pat on the back. We did our best effort.
Well, it's whatever you agree to, right? Where I feel like we should sum this up for the questioner, but it's whatever you agree to. Like David E. Kelly, right? The guy who wrote Mr. Mercedes and the guy who way back wrote Ally McBeal. He writes his scripts longhand on yellow pads. But as long as you live in a universe where somebody else has decided, look, David's going to give us his scripts on yellow pads and we're going to turn it into something, then that's okay, because in the end, what comes out is a TV show or a comic book. But okay, so just to sum up what I think I've heard so far to answer the questioner, you start with a script and your editors hack it up and work with that. And then your artist, so clear this up to me because we didn't talk about it. Your artist draws the whole book, but do you use both a penciler and an inker and then a colorist? Because I believe it's penciler, inker, colorist. Then somebody else comes in and does the lettering, and you might do some editing during the lettering, and then somebody else is doing the cover. I think that's everybody.
Yep.
I could even do. Go ahead. Sorry.
There's a process for I'm not sure how everybody works. I know everybody's process is a little bit different. But certainly, the way that I tend to do is I'll read the script and then really just kind of get these thumbnails of the whole thing. And it's all about just kind of working out the pacing, working out the visuals, failing as fast as you can so you can iterate, and then working from there. As far as I know, I tend to do the penciling and the inking, and then pass that off to a color. Sometimes I coloring, and then almost always somebody else does the letters.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you.
Well, myself, I do all the steps. I pencil, I ink, I color, and after that I letter the book also.
You letter the book?
Yeah.
Oh, Sergio's a machine.
Oh yes.
I have to admit that I'm very fast drawing.
That's
I draw books like Invisible Man. That's 4 issues, 100 pages more or less, in 4 or 5 months. But I don't remember which book exactly, but I remember one book that I did all the work in 1 week.
Wow.
It depends a lot of the script. I remember one that was Cry Havoc. That took a lot of redoings, and it was a script with problems in certain parts. I have to redraw it and that, but that probably is the one that took me more time. But I have to admit I'm very fast, and for me the key is to understand the script. When I read a script, at the moment I'm reading, I'm seeing the storytelling. If I don't see it, that page has a problem. But if I see it, I can do the work very fast.
Okay, we have another question from Sarah, and it's an equally prosaic question, which I really am so happy for these questions. And she asks, what software do you use for your writing and for your art? And I would ask, what software do you use for your publishing, for your bind up? Like, is it Adobe InDesign? Is it something else? Like, what are you using to bind the work, to compile the work? But first of all, you're writing. Drew and any other writers want to chime in? Do you use Final Draft? Do you just work in Word? Like, what do you do?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
software. What do you write on?
Uh, whatever I have available. Microsoft Word most of the time.
Google Docs most
Google
of the time.
Docs
Google
these
Docs,
days.
yeah.
I've been known to write scripts in Gmail. Like it's like
Yeah.
I wish I could say that I was like all badass and professional with all these cool writing, especially now that I've been like nominated for a cool award and everything for writing. They'll probably like there'll be a Ringo assassins that will shoot me down in the street tomorrow for admitting all this. I am constantly writing, which is probably why I even will write in my email if I have no other way of doing it. But these days, mostly Google Docs, because it's easy and I can let multiple people look it over. Even just for proofreading, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, it works. It works really well.
Beautiful. All right, cool. All right, art. And if any writers want to pitch in their own answer to that and say, I disagree, I would never use Google Docs, great. But those of you who are drawing, are you all digitally drawing, or any of you drawing on pen and ink and then scanning?
Can I go?
I use this.
Oh, go on, Sergio. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Sergio. I think you started first, right? I mean, I too, I'm a traditional guy. I'm not tech savvy in any way.
Me
So I
too.
got my desk right here, yeah. And basically, I just like the look of pen and ink better. I grew up reading like either indie or underground or horror comics, and I love that whole look of the inks and the screen. What do you call them? The pixelated kind of dots that people would use. Yeah, exactly. Which isn't around anymore, is it? I mean, I can't find it.
You'll buy it if you go to the art supply store. Yeah, but
I've never seen any anywhere.
Manga still uses it a lot, but yeah.
Yeah. But I like the hands-on approach like that. But I use the computer a lot.
Me too. Well, I spent a lot. I spent lockdown trying to learn to use this. It's not for me.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of giving away to my niece. I don't know what to do with that.
eBay.
Yeah, I bought a giant Cintiq about 5 years ago with the idea of trying to learn how to transition to digital art, and I got rid of it about 6 months later. I just hated it. It.
Can I ask you a question, Nicola? Because I'm a big fan of Black Magic. It's like I've been reading occult detective stuff for a long time. I think after 100 and some years, like you and Greg Rucka finally, made an occult detective story that makes sense to me.
Sweet. Thank you very much.
What is your techniques that you use on the book? Because it is a black and white book. I really like that choice to make it given it.
Yeah. Well, on that was kind of part of the reason why I decided to try doing it digitally. But no, I hate it. And with a lot of experimenting of sort of trying to sort of find a look for the book that felt right and that I enjoyed doing, I actually ended up on the most time-consuming, version of the lot, which is painting the whole thing in ink wash. Layers and layers and layers and layers of ink wash. Thanks very much.
It looks amazing. It looks amazing. I love that.
It's worth the time they put into it.
Yes.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
To answer the question, I always start with rough in pencil and paper. I was dragged kicking and screaming into the digital world of making comics because of time factor. It's really helped me speed up the process. But I always start with with a rough of the whole script in pencil, and both the Halloween Man comics that I drew, the the Christmas special in 2017 and the Halloween Man versus the Mummy that came out this week were drawn on Manga Studio. I scanned the roughs and then digitally work over them. And the cover to the Halloween Man special versus the Mummy, it was the first, I think it was my first work that was entirely digital. It was done on Procreate. I started working on Procreate. And I'm finding that it's a very powerful software, and so far I'm liking it very much. So I tried to do an entirely digital piece of art. That was the cover to the Halloween Man special, and I think it worked out just fine. But I do love the feel of the traditional of markers and ink and paper. It's just that it consumes a lot more time. Digital helps us speed things up. And Nicola, Black Magic is amazing. Oh my god, it looks so good.
Thanks.
Yeah, I tend to use Clip Studio a lot, but I mean, I don't do it for the pencils. I ink exclusively digitally because I'm not an inker at all. So when the need arises, then that's definitely what I use. But gesture drawings, you know, something that a lot of inkers will do is they'll print into the blue line and then ink on top of that. And what I'll do is I'll take my gestures that I do small and I'll blow them up and then use those for the underdrawing for my next stage. So basically I'll scan everything. And then put up or something, just have all the paper, which I've actually, you know, as inefficient as that sounds, I've actually found that it's sped me up a lot to do that, because it's a lot more iterative, and there's a lot less guesswork when I go to the next size.
So for the questioner, we heard Procreate and we heard what was that one that you said?
It's Clip Studio. Yeah, and
Yes.
iPad. It's really iPad's the best drawing surface out there, honestly.
You're using a stylus, I presume. Forgive me for not knowing that, but I'm not.
Yeah, it's the Apple Pencil. I mean, all the other ones, there's just too much parallax, and nothing feels like it's the only thing that I've found that feels close to traditional at all, really.
All right.
Yeah, I use Procreate as well. Oh, sorry.
Okay. No. Please go ahead.
I use Procreate as well. I do draw stuff by hand, but for all the work I've done for Halloween Man so far has all been in Procreate with an Apple Pencil. I'm kind of a cheapskate a little bit when it comes to supplies. I've been burned too many times from supplies I couldn't use or didn't know how to use. And one of the things that I like about working digital is the experimentation of different types of. It's like you have this toy box of all these different types of brushes and things, and I've really started to find line weights and things like that that really work really well with the way I like to draw. And I don't know, gosh, if I was still physically searching for brushes that did that, I might still be on the hunt. So I like the toy box aspect of doing it digitally.
That's a really good tip. Thank you.
I think for me, I just use everything in Clip Studio. I think I burned a couple of tablets, but I have already like this like I use a Hue one that is like not the latest one, but the one that actually has tilt, so the inking becomes a little bit easier for me, because the previous one that I used to do, it was like no tilt and it was like a pain to my wrist. But yeah, I do everything in Clip Studio. I just like do the rough and then but then again, when I see the script and it's so clear, I just go at it and then polish and be like, okay, do you like it? And you know, I just go at it, and because it's so straightforward and it's clear and I know exactly what they're telling. And if I don't know what I'm looking at or I'm having issues, I just ask questions. It's like, can I do this? Can I do that? And there you go, and that's it. And I mean, I am trained traditionally, but I'm sort of a messy person. So for me, digitally is like I can actually keep clothes that I can wear and not have paint everywhere on me. Like
Yeah.
I am very messy, but so like I like to feel the paints. I like to use them. I don't have an issue using them. It's just, man, it was like buying clothes every single week. I couldn't do it anymore, so I had to basically switch to digital at that point. But that was a long time ago. No, well, not that long, but some time ago. So
Thank you very much. Okay, so I got another question here, and that is Drew, and any of you who are writers can answer this. One script at a time, or do you stack them up? Are you sitting on like four issues worth of scripts already?
I have approximately 5 years worth of Halloween Man scripts written, and I'm constantly.
Are you serious?
No, I'm serious as a heart attack. Like Russell will back you up on this, and Jamie will as well.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
yeah.
Wow.
Like it's a shame Marvel and DC have never hired me, because I could probably write their entire line, and I'm dirt cheap. But like I'm constantly writing, because it's my outlet, and if given half a chance, like I'll just lose myself in it, because there's no place better than being there with the characters, and it's my happy place. And when I come up with a storyline, I usually will write it one issue at a time, and then we'll do an edit on the first issue, then I'll go into the next issue, and then we'll go back and change stuff when it's all done, because there's going to be inconsistencies and continuity errors and stuff that doesn't work. But yeah, like I'm sitting on a lot of stuff.
Oh, yes.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, okay. I got a really saucy question that I did not invent myself, but was recommended to me. And I think probably everybody's going to want to get onto this. So, all right, Drew, any pet peeves relating to the comic that people don't know about? Like that people don't know about making comics, this thing, tell me.
Personally, I have a couple of things, and they're petty. They're really petty, and I freely admit that they're petty. And I don't know if they're things that people don't know about, but like there's two things in particular. Over a decade ago, when Halloween Man was still a webcomic, there was a reviewer in Dallas, which is where I lived at the time, that called the comic the poor man's Hellboy. And because of that, anytime somebody compares it to Hellboy, my teeth just grind. Like I'm very sensitive, I guess, and I've just carried the angst of that for all these years, and it's childish, I admit, but my reaction to that was I didn't continue to take in, like I had like one Hellboy trade paperback, and I was like, okay, I don't want to be influenced by this, so I will just not read it anymore, because I don't even want to be subconsciously influenced by it, which is a shame, because I do think it's something that I'd like, and I think it's I love the designs that I see from it. Another thing, and this is something that happens probably more, but again, it also just kind of makes me scrape my teeth a little bit. I don't like it when people say, oh, this character looks like Two-Face. And I think, because I think, first of all, it's not what I was influenced by. Like when I was thinking about like the character,
the modern Two-Face. Right.
Yeah, like Two-Face didn't look like that when I was a kid. Like the sort of
never dawned on me at all. Yeah.
Yeah, the sort of
And when you
zombified
said
Two-Face.
I thought about the green guy, the guy with half.
Yeah, because that's what you and I grew up with.
Right.
The sort of zombified Two-Face didn't exist. Like I was thinking, you know, Phantom of the Opera, Terminator, and we just did a whole episode of Castle Horror on this. Darkman, like those were the things that you know, that's sort of like classic monster energy. That's what the sort of things on it. And again, it's admittedly it's childish. You know, I know it's like a stupid stuff to get bent out of shape about, but like you know, you asked me this, and I'm being in all honesty, in 20 years of doing this, I would rather never hear those two comments ever again.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I
Oh,
never
I
had that
don't
impression.
think it's petty because, you know, Drew has opened up about his, you know, the reasons why he created excuse me, I was going to say Dark Man. Why he created a Halloween Man. And, you know, it was to help him through a dark time. And Halloween Man, to me, uses like these dark themes and, you know, to uplift people, basically. That's very different from Hellboy. I think that anyone comparing it to Hellboy, that's like the most lazy thing that I've ever heard. It actually kind of pisses me off because there's absolutely no comparison as far as I know.
The only really thing is like they both fight monsters. I mean, it's like
That's sad.
Yeah.
There's a lot of you know, stories out there that are people, you know, fighting monsters, and I absolutely love Hellboy, but you know, I tend to almost relate Halloween Man more to you know, almost, you know, stuff like Ghostbusters or something like that aesthetically.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any comic out there like Hellboy right now, and you know, it's yeah, he's half zombie, you know, so it makes sense that half of him is. I think there's an old DC comic where there's a guy who's half zombie and half living person, you know. It's just it's not Two-Face. I don't think it's petty at all.
So okay, so that was your pet peeves, but I'm actually curious. We could turn this away and be slightly, you know, because I know we're going to come up on the end, and I want to be a little more positive as we wrap up, so we leave people feeling good. So I think a way to flip it would be what any of you can answer. What do people not get about comics that you would really like them to know? If there's nothing, that's okay.
All right, you know what? Can I go ahead with this because you know, I started out in the small press field and I tried to get into comics, and people kept telling me that my work was too comic bookish. Like I'm a really big fan of the classic EC comics and a lot of older stuff, like, you know, Terry and the Pirates and that kind of artwork, you know, Will Eisner. And people told me that, well, you're doing comic books, but they're too colorful or they're too cartoonish or anything like that. And it's like, you know, I think comics could be anything that you want them to be.
Yeah.
I think that people have this idea that, you know, they're either all superhero stuff or that in order to connect with a modern audience, you have to use like these have to be like uber serious and all the colors have to be washed out and just like stuff that just does not appeal to me in any way, shape, or form. And you know, I would say comics can be anything that you want them to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of variety out there. There's a lot of, you know, and granted, you know, a lot of it flies under the radar. You know, a lot of people do think it's all superheroes or whatever, which, you know, superheroes are awesome. But there's Paper Girls. There's which it was this amazing kind of breakout comic book that came out a little while ago. But that's you know, it's a story about some paper newspaper girls traveling. It's really dynamic, interesting stories. Just the books. You don't have a a budget that you have to adhere to, like you do in movies. You know, whatever your imagination can create, you can do it there.
Yeah, and I love Paper Girls too, and I like a lot of stuff that Jim Rugg is doing. If you follow him, or if you follow his YouTube channel, which is Cartoons Kayfabe, and they break down a lot of current stuff and older stuff, like talk about the old underground comics and how colorful they were actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are all really cool.
I think the nice thing about comics is that they kind of fly under everybody's radar. So people watch TV shows and people watch movies, and they're keeping an eye on those things, whereas comics are a little more still underground.
Yeah.
We find out about comics once they're made and picked up by Netflix and things. But in the meantime, in comics, they're talking about some really heavy political issues, society issues. Things are going on all the time. We're putting metaphors into these things. And I think in a lot of ways, comics are really allowed to speak about whatever they want. Because people don't have an eye on them and people aren't criticizing them, they're allowed to get away with a lot more, which is really great to read.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that.
But even when people were looking, if you think about the time of the Comics Code in the U.S., for example, there were always people making comics underground. Comics are a very accessible medium to produce. I mean, that's it. I think what I would like people to know is that comics are a medium. You can have an all-out action story like Akira. You can have a personal story that will gut punch you like Fun Home, and you can, and everything in between. You can have all kinds of stories for all kinds of audiences. I always think about Japan, where you literally have comics about people who working in old used bookstores.
Yeah.
And at the same time you have the big blockbuster action science fiction stories and the shonen books for boys and books for all kinds of audiences. And what I would like people to realize everywhere is that that's it. Comics are a medium, and everyone can make a comic, and there is a comic for everyone regardless of your interest. If you are interested in escapism, if you're interested in political commentary, if you're interested in personal stories, in coming out stories, there is a comic for you. I think that's what I would like people to realize about comics.
We are up against our time. I know there's a lot more, so I would say that if people have more questions for Drew, or really anybody, first of all, Drew, if people have more questions for you, where can they find you? Your Facebook page, like where does one hunt you down?
HalloweenMan.com will take you right to the Halloween Man Facebook page, and I'm happy and encourage people to ask me questions because I like getting that. It's Halloween Man Com on Twitter, and I'm actually active on Twitter now. I didn't use my Twitter account for years. I just started using it over the last few months. I am Drew_Halloween on Instagram, and again, please engage with me. I promise it won't be painful to talk to me on social media.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for being on. Thank you for your very eloquent answers and conversation. I'm truly lucky to have had a chance to know Drew and his work, and I feel lucky to have gotten a chance to meet all of you tonight. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful evening and a heck of a Halloween, because that is coming up in mere moments. So I will,
for Nicola, it's already Halloween. Yeah, happy Halloween, because you live in the future. Before we sign off, I really just want to say how special this is, seeing everybody here, everybody who I have a history with and a different history with, going over the history of this comic with everyone, and people who came across from different parts of the world, different time zones, different parts of the country. This has been a very meaningful evening for me. So thank you, everyone. I am truly blessed. And Jason Henderson, as far as your last question go, this is why comics matter right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
All right, everybody. Be safe. Ciao. We'll
Thanks
see all of
very
you
much,
very soon.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Happy
Bye-bye.
Halloween.
Thank
Happy
you.
Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Halloween.
Happy Halloween.